now for the nightcap of the doubleheader. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the second show of the day. Excuse me, episode 146 rather, the Mike to New Haven podcast. If you haven't checked out 145, that was earlier today with Phil Grimaldi. Phil came back on the show because he wanted to talk with me about a car chase he had back in March of 1985 that was eerily similar to the movie that played a huge role in why he became a cop, 1971's classic The French Connection. So, if you haven't checked out that episode, if you want to go back and watch it when you can. It was really good. So I won't waste too much time getting into this one. This is a new mini-series we're starting tonight. As you know, we have 3 on the Mike to New Haven podcast. Tales from the Boom Room, Profiles of the NYPD's Bomb Squad was the first. The second one, The Best of the Bravest, Interviews with the FDNY's Elite. The third, The E-Men, Inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, which my next guest was in for many, many years, as we'll discuss tonight. This one is the 4th and the newest, and Volume 1 is tonight. It's called Life on the NYPD's Hostage Negotiation Team, or rather, Talk to Me, Life on the NYPD's Hostage Negotiation Team. Welcome my next guest, who is quite frankly renowned for his communication skills, a 33-year veteran of the NYPD. He's what you would call a hard charger, a longtime former member of the Emergency Service Unit. He was tapped in 2001 to lead the NYPD's Hostage Negotiation Team. Also a FEMA search and rescue team leader. He's assisted with numerous missions, both here in the country, in different parts, and of course around the globe as well. Retiring in 2015, he's teaching both around the country and around the globe to different hostage negotiators and training them to be the best negotiators they can be. And that is retired NYPD Lieutenant Jack Cambria, who for Volume 1 of this new miniseries, Talk to Me, Life on the NYPD's Hostage Negotiation Team, joins me. Jack, welcome. How are you?
Well, hello to you, Michael, and thank you for inviting me, and hello to all my friends out there who might be watching.
Yes, indeed. Hello to them. So I believe you're a Brooklyn kid originally, right?
Yeah, you're Brooklyn. Yes, born and raised, and still here as we speak.
Okay, so take me through those early years.
Well, again, grew up in Brooklyn, mostly in the Midwood section of Brooklyn. I'm now living in the Bensonhurst section of Brooklyn, but I've been around, lived in Manhattan for a few years and in Long Island for a few years, but always found my way back to the holy borough of Brooklyn, as they call it. So, yeah.
So that brings us, I guess, into your early foray in the civil service. Do you come from a background of cops in your family or firemen?
So, no, I don't, Michael. I think I had no real great ambitions about becoming a police officer growing up. So before I became my job, after I had graduated from high school, took a couple of different various jobs. Kennedy Airport, I worked for a while. I was doing stocking of the planes, and I drove a truck before I actually became a police officer. But I never had no great aspirations. I know I always respected police officers. That I knew. In fact, as a youngster, growing up, when I was very young, grew up in a neighborhood called Borough Park in Brooklyn. And I happened to live right around the corner from the 66th precinct. For those Brooklynites out there, that's on 16th Avenue and 59th Street. And I remember at the time, and I'm going back to probably early 1960s, the police officers used to muster outside the precinct, station house. And I remember seeing them all the time, while the sergeant is giving them their roll call instruction. They were in there. If you remember the double-breasted, coats that they would wear, and the navy blue uniforms. And I used to be very impressed with watching that. So, but that was kind of what gave me the respect, for police officers. But it was after I had, graduated high school, looking for, to get a decent city job, and I took all the civil service exams. One of them being the police officer exam. And I was actually started to get processed for the first city agency that called me was the MTA, or whatever it might have been called back then, with the Transit Authority, and to be a bus driver, city bus driver. And I went through the whole processing of that, the physical, the background check, and all that. And I was pretty much it was like imminent that I was going to get hired. And then I received a letter from the police department that I had passed their entrance exam. They wanted to know if I was interested in still becoming a member. And, I think I might prefer that for me to be a police officer, maybe than a bus driver. So that's how I gravitated towards that. So I went through the process of all that, passed the background check and the psychological and the physical agility, and I became a police officer into the police academy.
The academy classes in the early 80s, 81, 82, 83, especially 82, were large. I think the class of 82 is perhaps the largest the NYPD has ever had, if not certainly one of the largest. So being in a class like that, of 3,000 cadets, do you feel the camaraderie, given the size of it and given the scope and of course the amount of people that were in the same situation as you were, strengthened your resolve further to become a cop as opposed to feeling lost in the shuffle given the magnitude of the class?
No, I think it was such a new experience. Everybody of those, and you're right, there's about 3,000 cadets in that class. We were so excited to be in that class, and that they actually broke it down into something called the Scooty chart, where they broke us into three different platoons, 1,000-person each platoon. I was in the B platoon, and everybody would work different hours. So you work 5 days going to school, 2 days off, then you work 4 to midnight tours while you're going to school, and then 3 days off. So it was always shifting, and every week you were working different weekends off and all that. So it was somewhat manageable. I remember we had to share lockers. This is the old police academy on 20th Street, by the way.
Right.
I was just last week at the new academy. I was very kindly asked by the current commander of the hostage negotiation team, Lieutenant Michael Tomeo, if I can come in and speak to the new class of negotiators. So it's back in my element again, doing that in my what I like to call my team, although it's no longer my team, of course. But and we made it work, and did it strengthen our resolve? I think, yeah, for me it did, for sure. And okay, hit us with your best, with your best shot, so to speak.
Jack Cambria, Gentleman Jack, as he's called, is our guest tonight.
Oh, you're doing your homework, huh?
Yep. I always a teacher's pet. Always have been. Always will be. This is volume one. This is volume one of the new miniseries. Talk to Me: Life on the NYPD's hostage negotiation team, and Lieutenant Jack Cambria is our guest tonight as we kick the miniseries off. Thank you all for watching and tuning in tonight. So your first command, 72nd Precinct out in Sunset Park. You worked there for a while. You worked in anti-crime for a while in that area. And the question I always like to ask is, when you're getting there, no matter the area, it could be a ritzy-ditzy neighborhood where there's not too many problems. It could be a poppin' neighborhood where a lot's going on. And as the old timers say, it's rocking. But either way, you have the senior guys or even gals that are there that show you the way, that take you under their wing, or even just by observing them, you learn what to do. So for you as a young kid at the time, who would you credit as helping you hone your skills as a cop?
Oh, Michael, there are so many that have served as my mentor, their tutelage, and showed me the right way. I like to say this comes from a dear friend of mine, James Shanahan. This is his quote, but I like to use it because it certainly applies to me. And I have learned from cops who were that good that they can talk a rabid, foaming at the mouth dog off of a meat truck. They were that good. These are the cops that can come into a scene, very chaotic scene, and automatically make things better by the words they choose, their professional presence, and just automatically just start to calm things down. I have also worked with cops who can arrive at the scene of the Blessed Nativity and cause a riot. Like cracking heads open, right? Start handing out summonses for loitering, right? Cause a riot. But I've learned from those cops as well. So I've learned from the best of the best, and I've also learned from maybe not the so best of the best through their examples of what not to do.
Right.
And I thank them all. I embrace them all as my teachers. So there are so many. I remember early on, probably one of my first of many role models. I don't like to mention names because they, then you exclude others, and
right.
Not right. But one individual, his name was George Beaufort. He was a uniformed detective when I was in the training unit. First got into the 72nd Precinct, was in the training unit. They called it the Task Force 2. And then we went into something called NSU, which is the Neighborhood Stabilization Unit. But George Beaufort was my first training officer. And again, you do radio car tours with George, all the recruits under his charge. And he taught me so many things about, what it meant to be a police officer. One real quick example, I remember I said to George one time, we were about to make a car stop. This is in Sunset Park, in the confines of the 72nd Precinct. And the car should not have been on the road, by my estimation. The muffler was smoking, the windshields were cracked, and the side view mirrors were broken. dents all over the car. And I made a rather not so nice remark. And I said, this car should not be on the road. And I probably used some more colorful language than that. But George then looked at me, Jack, maybe he doesn't have a choice. Maybe that's all he can afford to drive. He's still going to get summonses, for the car, and his headlights are out and all that. The car's, it's dangerous for him as well. He'll still get summonses, but he'll do that in a professional manner. And what he was saying to me, Jack, you're taking it personal. Why would you take it personal? Don't take it personal. And I used that guiding philosophy from that point on throughout my entire career. That it wasn't personal. Even if people are abusing you, verbally abusing you, and saying not so nice things to you as a police officer, it's not you that they're lashing out on, but rather it's your uniform. You're the most available means of authority in their presence at that moment. And their frustration is reaching out at that form of government that's in front of them. Not you, Jack Cambria, but rather your uniform. So that starts the process of de-escalation,
Right. No, I concur. So it brings us to your time in anti-crime, and anti-crime has just returned. And this is a unit in which, we'll talk later on about as a hostage negotiator, your best asset is your brain and how to use it and what to say, maybe what not to say in those moments, and rather pull back and listen. But as a anti-crime cop or street crime cop in those days, your best asset really was your eyes, your mind too, but your eyes, because it's not like now where a bulge can be my cell phone or something like that, or keys or whatever. A bulge back then could be a knife. A bulge back then could be a gun. And you have to look not only for that, but just what doesn't look right. Maybe you're in a neighborhood for a while and you see somebody that doesn't look like they belong there. They might be visiting a relative. They might be there for some other sinister motive. So nonetheless, when you're in a unit like that, where so much goes into observance and surveillance, tell me about how that helps sharpen your skills as a police officer.
Well, you're right. And before I got into anti-crime, I think it's important to note that there was a brand new unit that was started in the city of New York in the police department called CPOP. CPOP stands for Community Patrol Officers. Community Police Officers on Patrol. And it was an experiment in the 72nd Precinct. I was one of the 9 selected members to be part of this experiment. And you were given there was 9 different beats throughout, as we call them. They were foot posts, but they were rather large foot posts, maybe up to a square mile. And that was your beat area. And you would have to walk the streets, and you would have to go interact and meet the community. And that started my path of being observant as a police officer. Because now you're walking a lot of the same streets almost every day. Maybe not the same streets, but one day this street, one day that street. And you start to become observant. You get to know the community, who's living here, and what do they do when they're not home, when they're home, and you start to recognize patterns. And I remember early on in doing this, I got a little friendly with an elderly woman who lived on this one particular block. And I see her in the summertime, she'd be out, doing things, sweeping in front of our house, and I always stop to chat, say hello. And this one particular, and I knew a little bit about her family background. And this one particular day, I see a man, actually 2 men, in her front yard, and they're kind of looking over her doorway, and they observe me in my uniform, and all of a sudden they stop. So it was out of the pattern, it didn't fit the pattern of what I would see every single day. So I said, hey guys, how's it going? What are you doing? What's happening? And at that, she had just called 911. These 2 guys are trying to break into her home. She comes running out. They're just trying to break into my home. Okay, guys, you do me a favor. Turn around, put your hands behind your back, and at the ready. And so they did. So probably, by being able to recognize patterns, what is kind of fits, what doesn't, and when something is a little bit out of what normally would be, to have the ability to ask the right questions. Mm-hmm. So that kind of set me, to get into your question now about anti-crime, that kind of set me into that mode of trying to recognize patterns. What was normal and what was outside of that realm of what might be considered normal from everyday patterns. So then from that point, from the community policing unit, I went into the anti-crime unit. It might not a high arrest record at the time. And these are mostly quality of life conditions. Sunset Park was the 72nd precinct was really divided into two different sections. There was the I don't know and I hesitate to use the term, maybe a more upscale neighborhood, the Windsor Terrace area,
Mhm.
and then the other side of it was more depressed area where there was a lot of gangs at the time. In fact, one particular street they used to call Little Vietnam. That was 49th Street between 4th Avenue and 5th Avenue because of the guns that were there. A lot of gunplay, the drugs. It was that block was probably the heroin capital of all of Brooklyn, perhaps.
Yeah.
A lot of drug dealing going on there, and as a result, we make a lot of arrests in these areas. Mostly in the community area. Also before that, when I was on patrol as a police officer. So I made a lot of arrests, and based on those arrests, that arrest activity, then I was invited to go into the anti-crime unit, which I did for about a year before I left that. And again, and that just sharpens your skills of observation, and just seeing what doesn't belong. Made a fair amount of gun arrests, and I don't want to give away any tactics of what anti-crime police officers look for and how to identify somebody with a gun. And you're right, particularly in the summertime, you see a bulge underneath maybe their T-shirt. Might be one indicator, maybe.
Yeah.
But also now, and this is just around cell phones were just kind of starting in a lot, So it could have been that, but there were certain overt actions that these individuals would usually do when they see the police. And this is what you would train to look for, and then you can go and have your common right of inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, sir, how are you? What's going on? Everything okay today? And you can and that's just, your normal right of inquiry. Anybody can do that, any police officer. And then if it goes to that next level, then there'd be, after that stop, a question and questioning, then maybe a frisk based on what you are observing and then, by their answers and how they are articulating themselves, and how they might be acting. So that's how that worked out, yeah.
I think what's interesting about it is that you're in plain clothes, and these criminals, as I've covered before, some of them are just plain old stupid. Some of them are really, really stupid. But some of them, it's not that they're dumb on an intelligence level. They have smarts. Unfortunately, as I've said before with other guests, they're not using it for the right things. So they know, even if it's a basic level criminal with a handgun on them and not some major player in the criminal world, they know how to spot a cop. The same way a cop knows how to spot a criminal, it's the other way around too with a lot of these guys. And you're coming into a neighborhood that you don't live in, that because you're around it all the time, but that you don't live in. And even if it's a civilian, they could say, I think that person's a cop. There's giveaways. So for you, how do you blend in?
Well, you're right. And they come to recognize the vehicles that you use. Particularly if you run out of a vehicle and you're making an arrest, all the neighbors say, "Oh, they have a red Chevy," and so on. So they do kind of recognize you. So you just kind of driving around and you're hoping that you can blend. You're subject to what you have. We were able to use bicycles in the summertime. So we would bring our own bicycles in. This was before like the bike units and all that.
Right.
And we'd just ride with a partner, never alone, running around and just like we're kind of blending in that fashion. And maybe if we see something, okay, then we'd make that arrest. And then we'd have a radio call come back and we'd transport our bikes as well, along with the prisoner, back to the station house so we can do the processing. But you try to find innovative ways. And my partner and I, he was very proactive. He's no longer with us. He passed. His name was Douglas Lentine, and I pay homage to Douglas. He was an amazing street cop. But at nighttime, we'd take a walk into Sunset Park, and I'd just be walking by myself. He'd be back ghosting me, and just see if we can, come up with anything just in order to keep that park and the community safe. So you try to find different innovative ways, I think, to blend, so to speak.
Right. And that brings us to 1986. Anytime, baby. Emergency Service Unit.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So by that point, 4 years on, how'd the opportunity to go to ESU open up for you?
So it was actually on my pretty much close to my 5th anniversary is when I got on. You have to have at least 5 years as a patrol officer before you'll be eligible for emergency service. So actually, Michael, my career chronology is very easy to put on paper. So I was a police officer in the 72nd. Then I went to emergency service as a police officer. When I got promoted to sergeant, I had to leave and went back to the 72nd precinct. And then I was able to get back in time to the emergency service unit as a sergeant. And when I promoted to lieutenant, I went back to, guess where?
72nd.
72nd precinct. There you go. And then after a couple of months, I was able to get back to emergency service as a lieutenant. And then from there to the hostage negotiation team, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So it's very easy to put on paper. So it's 7-2 ESU, 7-2 ESU, 7-2 ESU. I spent a total of about 16 years in emergency service, not consecutive, however. So I did about 5 years as a police officer. I did 9 years as a sergeant. And then I did the 2 years as a lieutenant before getting transferred into the hostage negotiation team. And it was an amazing, amazing career. So I loved it. I loved actually every aspect of my career.
You know, it's interesting because you spent a lot of your time in Truck 6 over in Brooklyn South, and you know, yeah, and the thing about Brooklyn, as I've covered before, is that it's such a large borough that ESU has 3 trucks for it. There's Truck 6, there's Truck 7, and there's Truck 8. And it's the only borough that has 3 trucks representing it. Other boroughs normally have 2. Manhattan, for example, has Truck 2 up in Harlem, and the Hollywood Truck 1 down at the 13th precinct.
They had make instead of 2 boxes, they had make a box. Trucks all over them, so we teased them about that.
Yeah, no, I've heard the great stories. You know, Johnny Lampkin and Bob Masucci, you know, and Paulie Perricone were down in Truck 1 for many years.
Oh, solid people. Great
yeah, each of those guys have been on this show. So for you, each borough has different emergencies. You know, what was common for Truck 6?
So was that last question, please, Michael?
Each borough has different challenges and different emergencies. Like, for example, Truck 1 has all the high rises and the skyscrapers, and maybe they got to go up there and get somebody down. For you in Truck 6, what was the most common emergency to go to?
Well, you know, in Truck 6 area, we had, you know, some bridge work. The Verrazano Bridge was a popular site for jumpers. And I can't even begin to tell you how many times up on top of the girders of those bridges there. Something that was unique that no other truck unit had was we had Coney Island. And Coney Island has the parachute jump, as your viewers may know. And every July 4th, actually between July 4th and the early mornings of July 5th, there was a man that would able to bypass police security because they got wise to it after a while, and they would post sentry around the parachute jump. But he would climb to the top of that structure and place an humongous Puerto Rican flag. So in the morning now, all the, you know, at the time was, you know, I guess it still is, it's a very large Russian community. They'd be calling to the police station, there's a Puerto Rican flag, you know, and they would respond, verify, and guess who they would call to take it down? Emergency service. So I had actually climbed up there, you know, on a couple of occasions with you know, with a couple of the guys, and we kind of marked it up as a training exercise. And we'd have to climb to the top there and remove the flag, you know, so just kind of a unique kind of thing, you know. But we had our share of, you know, I think pretty much all the trucks had very similar type of jobs. One truck might have a little more of one type as opposed to another, but pretty much it's all the same. It reminds me when I used to watch the television show Cops, if you ever seen it.
Yes.
No matter where in the country that they're filming, the jobs are almost identical. You know, maybe domestic violence, or you're getting to an emotionally disturbed individual, or, you know, a man with a gun. So, you know, it just there's different volumes of it, different amounts of volume.
And that's true. Definitely in a compact area like Brooklyn South, you know, it's expansive. And I think that what I covered before as part of my emergency service miniseries that I was mentioning at the beginning is that ESU is really a jack of all trades. You know, if you're a baseball fan, it's the 5-tool player. Not only can he hit, but he can field. He can run the bases really well, you know, and things of that nature. Because one aspect, or one moment, I should say, they are on the bridge. They are talking down somebody who is in a moment of sheer inrush. How would I put it? Sheer, not panic, but despondency. That's the word I'm looking for. But you can go from doing something like that to a pin job, as you guys call them, a car accident. You're extricating somebody. You do assist the FDNY, even though you're not firefighters. You're at these scenes as well, and you're doing the raids. You know, you're kicking down the door on some maniac drug dealer with a gun. So all of that and learning about each of these different things, not to mention the water rescues, what does that do for a cop's psyche? Because it is exciting stuff, and to learn it all at once, man, for as amazing as it is, it can be an information overload because there's so much to know.
Yeah. Oh no, it was a a thrill a minute. You were living the 6 o'clock news. That's
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's true. You go from one assignment of going, with a high risk warrant, going to somebody's door in that tactical application with the ballistic vest on, the helmets, the machine guns, the battering rams, to the very next job, maybe taking a cat out of a tree, which has happened over and again.
Mm-hmm.
So you are a very diversified type of individual, and it gets to a point where you kind of realize that there's not too much that you can't handle. So whatever they throw at you, like the song, the Pat Benatar song at the time, hit me with your best shot. Let me see if I can handle this. And you do, and you figure it out. And what I learned as a supervisor in Truck 6, as a sergeant in Truck 6, was I started to recognize certain officers had more aptitude for one particular assignment than another. So, for example, some officers were much more better at doing rescue work, whereas other officers might be a lot better with the gun work, the machine guns and holding that and doing that type of work. So it would depend on the assignment and who I had before me, who was working with that particular tour of duty. But if it was a rescue, I knew some people had better aptitude with the ropes, how to make certain knots and how to secure people on harnesses. And I'd go for them because it was about the success of the job, ultimately, getting it done. And so everybody had, was cross-trained. I remember when I first got onto the job, an old timer says, all right, kid, we're talking about the big rescue truck. This side of the truck is for saving lives, and this side of the truck is for taking lives under the right set of circumstances. That's what all the guns were and all of that. Okay. So everybody was cross-trained in that truck. In fact, as a sergeant, I was responsible for chauffeurizing, what we would call chauffeurizing police officer in the emergency service unit in my squad. Chauffeurizing meaning the chauffeur of the truck. So it's not just driving that big truck. That's just a very small part of it. Yeah. To be a chauffeur, you have to be qualified to know where every piece of equipment on that truck is. So on a job, when somebody comes running and says, give me a carabiner, where the carabiner is, so they have to know exactly where everything is on that truck. So, and sometimes it takes up to 3 or 4 weeks before they, and that's studying every single day because they know they're going to get a test. I'll leave you a test in 3 weeks. You prepare for it. So right. Studying for a test. So they know where every piece of equipment on that truck is, and everybody is cross-trained on every piece of equipment on that truck. As I said, some have a little bit of a better aptitude on one area, then I would gravitate towards that on a particular job.
I have a question here in the chat from Alicia B. And Alicia, I'm sorry I didn't get to your question earlier. She wants to know, does Jack have a book, or is he considering writing a book?
No, it's funny you say that. Alicia, hello, Alicia, and thank you for your question. So, Alicia, I do have a book, but right now it's in Italian only. It's out in Italy. It's called Parliamo, which loosely means let's talk about it. So I have the book already written in English. And in fact, just 2 weeks, I presented it to a publisher who's looking through it right now. And if that doesn't work out, then I may look to go the self-publishing route. So to answer your question, please stay tuned. All right.
All right.
And thank you for asking.
Yes, thank you indeed to Alicia B. And a shout out to the live chat, of course, Jalea Michelle, which is my sister. She's here tonight. Hi, Judge. And Michael Prate, he says the best assignment on the job was being a part of the team and working for Jack. Great stuff.
Michael Prate, 79 Precinct Detective, first grade, an amazing negotiator. Him and his partner, Chris Scandone, they were all over Brooklyn. They worked out of Brooklyn North, but that didn't matter. They knew no boundaries. So when a hostage job would come in, they were right on it, and I always depended on them greatly. So, hello, Michael.
And Michael's a big supporter of this show, and I'll have to get him and Chris on because I know Chris Gandol through LinkedIn as well. So I'll have to get both these guys on. And here we have, I'm going to pronounce the name wrong. I'm sorry, ma'am. Kadambari Morali Wade, if I didn't say that right, my apologies. It's absolutely fantastic to be listening to Lieutenant Cambria. She says, "Thank you, sir, for your service. I have a question. Is it harder now to be a hostage negotiator in the age of social media, cameras everywhere, when fluid, changing situations that are already stressful now have an added layer of everything because of this?" That is an excellent question.
It is indeed, and thank you for asking it. So, yes and no. So the no part of it is that the principles of negotiation, I think, have always remained the same. It's about active listening. It's about emotional lowering and dealing with people on a personal level. The more complex part of it now, you're right, with social media and um, pretty much when I was doing what I was doing, with the hostage team, um, we got more and more involved with text messaging negotiations. The younger folks out there, they didn't want to talk to you directly on the phone. So, okay, then we would send them a text message. Would you be willing to talk to you via text? And they would be a little more comfortable with that. But that proves to have certain challenges because text messages, you can't measure emotion. It's just the words. So when we listen to people as negotiators, it's called active listening. There's a whole skill set of active listening. One of them is known as emotional lowering, or trying to understand someone's emotion. And you can't do that while reading a text message. Right?
Right.
So you can't label somebody's emotion. And when you are able to label their emotion while you're speaking with them, then I can come back to you. Michael, you seem upset today.
Right.
What's the matter? And that'll probably open the dialogue. You'll probably respond, well, you're damn right I'm upset. And I said, yeah, I see that, Michael. So please, tell me. And if I'm the reason you're upset, Michael, you think I'd want to know about that?
Well, of course.
Yeah, I would. And it's going to afford me the opportunity then to say why I said what I said or why I did what I did. Well, no wonder why you're upset. I'm sorry. Let me please explain why I said that. And it'll start the process of de-escalating emotion. So, but with text messaging and that technology, it's difficult. And the other end is Facebook. Sometimes they'll go over Facebook, and they'll be getting information from friends. And that's a problem for us because we want to kind of contain the scene. And if it's a tactical, application where it might have to be a tactical intervention, we don't want to give away our tactics. But by people on the outside who now and they're putting stuff over Facebook and things like that, it does become a challenge. So, hope that answers your question a little bit.
No, and like I said, in Kadambari, and again, I hope I'm saying your name right. No disrespect intended. If I said it wrong, I sincerely apologize. That is a very, very good question. I thank you for watching first and foremost tonight, and for asking that question. Great question. So I guess, and there's also an added layer of just the common sense aspect in a time in which the situation borders on the senseless, because there's something you mentioned on the set of the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, of which they made in 2008 with John Turturro and John Travolta, and as well as Denzel Washington, in which you said behind the scenes as they were filming, and Turturro's character, Lieutenant Vincent Caminetti, was based partially on you. Okay, either you can talk to me, or you can talk to emergency service, who are just the guys with the heavy tactics or tactical vests, I should say, and helmets and shotguns. So do you want to talk to them? And they're not going to hurt you unless you give them a valid reason to. But still, it's the visual. Here I am coming to you. I got a police vest on. Yeah, maybe I have a gun on me. Maybe I don't. But better me than them. And maybe that serves a purpose to get them to, at least in that moment, for a second even, calm down and assess the situation from a rational standpoint.
Sure. Well, that's very true, Michael. So you must have a very strong tactical presence on any hostage situation, and it's for two reasons. First off, for the reason that you just explained, it serves as a motivator. So if you don't want to talk to me, you have to talk to them.
Yeah.
And as they look out that window, they see the guns and the vests and the helmets, the battering rams. More likely than not, they can come back and say, okay, I prefer to talk to you. Thank you very much. Let's talk. And then the second reason, of course, if the job starts to go terribly wrong and people start getting injured or even the worst case scenario, killed by this hostage taker, the tactical team, emergency service, has to be at the ready to go through that door in a second's notice, and hopefully to get this resolved as best as we can. So you have to have that strong tactical presence in place if you hope to be effective in any hostage type of situation.
there was a couple of situations. You had taken a hostage negotiation class. You were in the same class. Scott Wagner mentioned this to me. You're in the same class as him.
John Wagner, yes, another good buddy of mine.
And he'll and mine too. Amazing guy. He'll be on the show soon as part of this hostage negotiation miniseries as well. And there was a couple of jobs I want to ask you about. This first one, it was a Taiwanese gentleman who was mentally ill in 1988, I believe. And he shot it out with the police. He injured 14 officers in total, not seriously. You were among them. Negotiations.
Oh, of course, yeah, on the Clinton Street job.
Yeah,
on Clinton Street, on the south, by the South Street Seaport. Yeah, on West Street. So not West Street, but on Clinton Street. Yeah, that was a crazy job. So it started on the late tour. Individual. It had to do with his wife. Something to do. I'm trying to remember it. Over a phone bill, and his wife had gone to China, and he was with the two kids, and he went out of his mind. And he started shooting out the window. And at the time, we had three separate agencies. We had the NYPD, we had the housing police, and we had the transit police.
Mm.
So two housing officers arrive on the scene, and when they get out of their car, he starts firing from his balcony on one of the upper floors. They dive for cover. They're behind the vehicle. They're calling for the 1013 assistance. And we all get there. I worked in Brooklyn at the time in Truck 8, which is Brooklyn North Truck. So we got over, the Brooklyn Bridge quickly, assisted one truck that was their area, and my truck, a truck, we put up ballistic blankets on the side of our truck in order to serve as a barrier between their radio car and the balcony, and we were able to get them into the back of our truck, and we drove them off to safety. And that went, oh my gosh, many, many hours, and finally we had gotten the door off its hinges, and the detectives and ESU had found out finally where these shots came from, because we didn't know initially. And that became he was now barricaded with his two young children. They were very young, 9 years old, 10 years old, like this. And we had seen them because we were able to remove the door from its hinges. So we had full access into the apartment. We had the 8-foot shield in front of the doorway. And every once in a while he'd fire his round into the hallway, ricocheting off the balcony. 9 of us got shot, very minor, superficial wounds. Like a little pellet in my pinky, I think it was. Embarrassed to even talk about it. But finally, at one point, he got to a position where he started shooting us again. Well, earlier on, before I get to that, he's off in the distance in the apartment. We had 2 gunshots go off. And now all of a sudden, we're not seeing the children anymore. We would see them occasionally going back and forth. And we come to learn later that he took the 2 children to the kitchen area and he blew their brains out. He shot them both in the head. And then he comes out to the doorway, he forces a confrontation, and the police officer, Joe Dalton, from Mercy Service at the time, he returned fire, and that individual lost that battle and brought up to the hospital. That's when we made entry, we discovered the 2 young children. So that was a sad job. It really was, over a period of many, many hours.
Another question here from Alicia B. And if you have any questions for Jack or even myself, although you should direct them to Jack as he's more interesting, ask away and I'll make sure he sees them. And that is from Alicia B. And thank you, Alicia, for asking this. How much psychology training does Jack have, or did he learn by doing? I think getting into people's heads in the right way, of course, was a big part of what he did.
Well, thank you for your question, Alicia. And it's a smart question as well. So, one of the criteria of being a hostage negotiator is having a strong foundation in policing. And I'll get to your question in just a second, Alicia. When I first took over the team, I put a criteria in place that the negotiator, if you want to be seriously considered as a hostage negotiator, you had to have at least 12 years experience with the NYPD before you'd be seriously considered. And there were exceptions to that rule, of course. But the reason for that was that at 12 years, particularly with the within the New York City Police Department, it's going to give you a very strong foundation in policing, where you would know what people might respond to who are in crisis by the things you said to them in the past. Either they respond either in a positive way or a negative. Maybe we shouldn't say that again. It didn't work the last time. So you learn from your past mistakes, and you just get stronger. And then there was a second reason for that as well. It would put, with that 12-year criteria, it would put the candidates in a certain age grouping, probably around 35 years or so, give or take a little bit. And probably at 35 years of age, one would know what it means to experience the emotion of love, at one point in their life, to know what it means to have been hurt in love at one point in their life, to know what it means to know success, and perhaps most importantly, to know what it means to know failure. I believe you must know failure in your life before you can know success. And the
That's
greater the
true.
failure you experience, yeah, the greater life lesson you learned as well that you've experienced. So failure is a pathway to success. So that plays into it by understanding some human dynamics. So it's kind of on the job training of psychology as well. Once you are accepted into the class, it's a 2 week class. First week is the basics of negotiations, response protocols, the equipment that you have to use, negotiating as well, maybe reviewing case studies, active listening skills certainly. But then the second week was dedicated, and still is, to what we call the EPT program, the Emergency Psychological Technician Program. And that was administered over at John Jay College by a forensic psychologist who was part of the staff there. And every day he would come in this case it was a him, Dr. Stu Kirshner. He's no longer with the college. But he would come in every day and he'd give a different lesson on a different psychological component that police officers and negotiators would most likely come in contact with. So schizophrenia, for example, for bipolar disorder, depression, suicide, awareness. And then in the afternoon sessions, we'd have professional active trainers come in, and the only prop that we would use was a door on a door frame, where the active trainer would be on one side. They'd be very well versed in these different types of psychological, disorders, and the new negotiator would be on the other side of the door. And they were given the only rule was that no tactics are allowed. You have to negotiate this through your word. And of course, the active trainers would also be instructed that they can't really hurt anybody, otherwise, then it's a tactical intervention, right? And they would have to practice, dealing with the most disturbed or mentally ill subject on this side of that door. So to answer your question, Alicia, yes, there is some psychological training. If you come into the unit when you apply, some had degrees in psychology. That would enhance your chances of getting into it, but not exclusively. So it was more about your strong foundation in policing and the actual operational component of interacting with people who are in crisis.
A couple of other jobs I want to ask you about. One of them, well, both of them happened while you were in ESU. This first one, when the two trains collided, because Maddie Lawrence and I were talking about this off the air. I'm going to have her on the show soon. One of the original women in ESU. When the two trains collided, I believe, out in Brooklyn. Were you among the guys that were on that job?
No, that was the one in Williamsburg?
I think so, yep. The train crash,
no,
yep.
No, I wasn't working that particular day, so I wasn't there. I read about it, of course, but yeah.
And 2000, Jose Guerra and a couple other ESU cops were shot. Jose was the most critically injured of the three. He survived, but he was shot in the face. And this was another standoff similar to the one you had with the Taiwanese man in 1988. Were you on that job?
I got there later on. I wasn't working at the particular day. Once the word came out, I was in Brooklyn. I conferred with our commanding officer, Inspector Bruce Smoker at the time, went on to become a chief. And he was get there now. So I got there, and by this point it was pretty much over. The shooting had taken place. Jose was already shot in his eye, very seriously injured. Oh my gosh. And and that's the thing about these jobs, Michael. You don't never know what you're getting into. Case in point, Officers Rivera and Mora just last week.
Yeah.
What might have been deemed, and I hate to use the term, as a routine assignment. There's really no routine assignments in policing, but something they've handled, hundreds of times before, and you don't expect that it's going to go the way it goes. So you don't know. You just never know.
No, you never know at all, and that's kind of the unpredictable nature. I mean, and it's true of really the first responder profession as a whole, because I'm sure you're aware of the tragedy in Baltimore, the 3 firefighters who were killed in the building collapse.
Yeah.
Pulling up, well, all right, this is another job. Get some hose on the fire, and we'll be on our merry way. But it didn't turn out that way.
And the building collapses, the roof collapses, and oh my gosh, yeah.
And you've been on plenty of those during your time in ESU. I think what's interesting, and that brings us to July of 2001, when I believe you left ESU and went out to head the hostage negotiation team, is that on these scenes, it's not just HNT. Sometimes Taru is there. sometimes ESU's there, especially if it's somebody that's up on the bridge, like we talked about earlier, that's threatening to jump. You're part of talking with that person. There's a great clip from that ESU documentary, and it's not on YouTube anymore. I don't know what happened to it, but you were in it. The A&E did in 1999. Bill Curtis, and you were featured in the earlier portion. I would show it if it was available to me, but in the early stages, they're on the Triborough Bridge because there's this guy who's literally on coke. He says it. He's coked out of his mind. He's only wearing underwear, and he's going back and forth like a cat, and they're trying to talk him down. And you see ESU there looking up, and the late Vinny Dan's is on the ladder, and he goes and he grabs him. But down there is a TARU van and a hostage negotiation supervisor. So on those scenes where you have all these other units that know what to do because they're trained in a similar fashion, what role does H&T have, not just in obviously talking to this person, but coordinating with the other units on the scene?
Well, you're right, and that's exactly what it is. We used to call ourselves the Three Musketeers. So emergency service, the TARU, and the hostage negotiators, and we all have very specific roles in doing that. So TARU, for example, were our department technicians. They were the individuals that would do our anything kind of technical work, film work, filming an incident, perhaps tapping into phone lines for us. They would maintain our crisis phone for us as well, the hostage team. And when we get there, we'd set up. So when I was still doing this, the negotiators didn't have their own personal heavy ballistic vest. They were a little hard to come by at the time. Budget is always a concern. They were over $2,500 each vest. So I had 150 negotiators, and so the department wasn't willing to go that money. So what we did, we came up with 10 vests, and we would leave those vests on the TARU truck. And when knowing that we'd all be at the job together, and sometimes they'd get there a little before us, sometimes we before them, and we just then respond to the truck and get our ballistic vest. Today, thank goodness, with the new commanders move the efforts forward, and they forced the department to get everybody a ballistic vest because they saw the liability in that by not giving each negotiator their own personalized heavy ballistic vest. Emergency service has limited vests on their big truck. They have maybe one or two extra, but those are always grabbed very quickly by the incident commander. The captains and chiefs will come on who have to be in the perimeter. So we couldn't rely on emergency service for those vests. So TARU would provide that service for us as well. Emergency service, of course, does what emergency service does. They would be tasked with climbing the girders of that bridge. We saw Vinny Dan's, wonderful man, and we miss him very dearly. And that would be their responsibility to try to contain this individual from going all over the bridge and keep him contained to one area. So the negotiators wouldn't go up on the bridge. That was probably the only, at the time, the only negotiator that was qualified to be on the bridge because I was trained at my own harnesses from emergency service. Mm-hmm. But I didn't do it because that was no longer my role. But what we did, TARU would also have what we would call a throwaway phone. It was a cell phone, that we can give to emergency service, and we can get it to the individual so we can talk to them from the roadway if the opportunity presented itself. Mm-hmm. And then the negotiator would just do what they do. They negotiate with them, try to reason with the individual, try to interrupt his or her thinking process, the subject on the bridge, from what they want it to be to what we want it to be. So that's why we call us Three Musketeers. We worked with each other. And everybody had their own specific role, but it was a coordinated effort as well.
Right. And that job that I showcased when I was talking to the aforementioned Sergeant Lampkin, and for those of you go check out that episode and that part specifically where I played the clip, that job is hilarious because it ended well. They got the guy down. They got him the help he needed. He was put in an FDNY ambulance and taken to the hospital for some psychiatric observation, I should say. But there's one guy on the radio saying, "I don't know what this guy's on, man." And then 5 seconds later, "You think you can make a grab?" And they go up there, and Vinny and the other cop, I can't because his back was turned in the video, so I don't know who it was, but I know it was Vinny on the ladder as well. They go up there and they do a great job, and they make the grab. And there's one on the ground below, another guy who's not with us anymore, John Delera, who I mentioned often on this show. He was on that job. He wasn't on the ladder, but he was looking up, chewing gum, just like, okay,
This is what we got. How are we going to figure it out? And that's what you do. And you figure it out. Figure it out. So.
We got another question in the chat. Dr. Stephen Wachschel, who, if you follow Police Off the Cuff, he's been on Police Off the Cuff numerous times, a great psychologist. He says, is there a defining moment when negotiating stops and it becomes tactical other than shots fired?
Well, hello to, first off, Doctor. A very
Hi, Doc.
Good of mine as well. So I thank you for being on the show. But you know, the philosophy is that time is on our side. When time can be on our side, the longer an incident proceeds without violence, the more likely it will end in a peaceful resolve. But there are indicators, and oftentimes the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior.
Right.
So we look for the behavioral traits of the individual, and we have an intelligence officer on our team. It's a 5-position team, hostage negotiation team. One of those positions is the intelligence officer, and it's the role of the intelligence officer, detective, to do what they do, find out why we're here today, and find out, and they'll be checking police records as well, any past domestic violence incidents involving this individual. So we'll try to get a little bit of a profile of who we are speaking to today. And that'll just give us, kind of give us a little bit of a heads up, but their actions behind that door will dictate how this job will turn out. So we talk a lot about the role of the incident commander. The definition of the incident commander in the NYPD is the highest ranking member from Patrol Services Bureau that's physically on the scene. So it usually starts out with a sergeant, but then as the job gets more intense, it goes to a lieutenant, then a captain, then even the duty chiefs might respond on the incident. So that highest ranking member is the incident commander, and that incident commander will pretty much call the shots after input from the ESU supervisors on the scene, from the hostage negotiation supervisors on the scene, and maybe even the TARO supervisor. And then based on their many years of policing experience, talking about the incident commander now, will make a determination how this job will play out. It's really a simple task for that incident commander. So if the individual, for example, is talking to us, not hurting anybody, then the decision is easy. Continue negotiating. However, once that dynamic changes, they start hurting people, killing people, then it's no longer a negotiation. And then the tactical team will be directed to the issue, directed to get through that door as quickly as you can. So we talk about a lot about the role of the incident commander, which is the police highest ranking member. But in reality, I would suggest the true incident commander here is that subject on the other side of that door. So his or her actions will dictate how this job will play out. So time is on our side.
I never thought of it that way. That's a good point. It's
Yeah.
true. Because, for as skilled as you may come into it, it doesn't even have to be that the negotiator says something wrong. It can just be that person's state. I mean, you're not talking to a rational individual. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So,
Michael, I had a guy one time on the Verrazano Bridge, on the Gorda Bridge, and I said to him, this is after talking to him for a while, I said, if you do this, meaning jump, you'll be killing the wrong guy. And he looks at me, what are you talking about? I said, the guy in that girder of that bridge is not the guy that you know. Some emotions have taken over at the moment, and it's not the guy you know or anybody that knows you know. So if you do it, you're going to become the wrong guy. And he started to pay attention to that. He knew he was in an emotional, distraught state, and that there were other actions at play here. He wasn't on his right mind.
And by getting off that gird, he kills that guy. He kills the emotionally distraught guy as opposed to the true version of himself.
That's it. And that was the point of that. And he did get that. He got it. We did have an intervention, thank goodness, on that. Just with that same guy, we'll call him Richard. Richard, at the time, he was a 63-year-old man. He had no job. He had no money. He had no family. And he had no friends. So as I'm listening to him tell me the story, I say to him, yeah, I know exactly how you feel. And you know what he said to me? Because you don't know exactly how I feel. Because if you did, you'll be standing there right next to me wanting to jump. And when he said that, I realized what he had heard. What he had heard was arrogance. That was certainly not my purpose to do that, but that's what he heard. I had a job, maybe a little money. I had family and I had friends. Everything that he did not. And I come along saying I know exactly how you feel. So I apologized for saying that. I said, Richard, I'm sorry, that's not how I meant it, and no malintent. And he forgave me. He goes, yeah, whatever. And finally, I got feeling sorry for me that I made a mistake, but I apologized. And ultimately, we did have an intervention. We got him back onto the roadway. We got him off to the hospital.
I'll get back to more of your work with hostage negotiation in a second. And Lieutenant Jack Cambria is our guest this evening. This is volume 1 of the new miniseries, Talk to Me, Life on the NYPD's hostage negotiation team. But I mentioned when I was introducing you, your work with FEMA. Hurricane Marilyn struck, you were down there for that. And the Atlanta Olympics bombing, you were down there for as a part of New York Search and Rescue Task Force 1. And what's interesting about that is that you know a little bit about explosives, given the fact that ESU and the bomb squad works very closely at these scenes. The guys that you see putting the bomb suit on these guys and taking it off is you guys in ESU. So you have the surface level knowledge, even if you're not a bomb tech yourself. So particularly for that, which that's an incident that gets overshadowed by other terroristic incidents in the 90s. What was it like being down there for that?
So that was interesting, Michael. So it was a 3 week event at the time, and so we had three separate teams, and it was just for a standby. We were staying on the military base, probably about maybe 10 miles from the location. We did training, back and forth on the Black Hawk helicopters that would transport us to the site if there was an incident. So I was part of the second team that went down there. So we got down there on let's say a Monday. We arrived Monday. We got our bunks where we were going to be assigned. They call us out on the line as a training session, and they tell us at one point during your week here, we're going to do a practice drill to get you online. You have to be on the line within 5 minutes, dressed, your gear on your back, ready to go within 5 minutes. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen in a few days, but it's going to happen. We're going to give you a heads up. So that very first night, we all go to sleep at this point, about 2 o'clock in the morning. All of a sudden, the air horn goes off, which was the signal that mobilization, let's go. So 2 o'clock in the morning, everybody's saying, okay, 2 o'clock in the morning, really, seriously, But okay, at least we get it over with, right? We all get on the line within 5 minutes, had our gear on our back, and then they say, this is not a drill. There was just a bombing in Olympic Village. We're all going to go down there, see if anybody's trapped and all that. We all get as far onto the helicopters, and they start to take off. And finally, it comes word that nobody was trapped, and that's how that went. So we did a quick circle around the village, and then we landed back at the base. So we actually didn't get down to the base to the Olympic Village itself, but even though there was a bomb that exploded, but nobody. Our purpose was rescue, search and rescue, and nobody was trapped. So we had to do any rescues.
Yeah, and that task force was very, very interesting in that it was comprised of not just you guys, but also FDNY guys. Mike Milner, who you might know, has been on this show from my FDNY miniseries, and he was on that. So you worked with Mike. You worked with Terry Hatton as well. I think Dennis Mojica was on that. So when you look back on...
Ray Downey.
Ray Downey was the godfather of that as well. Eddie Metcalf, who will be on the show soon, was also on that.
We became very close during these FEMA days on both of my deployments in Puerto Rico and also in Atlanta, and we became good friends. So that was a hard hit. They all lost their lives in 9/11.
Yeah, and that's it. I love the vision though by Chief Downey, because I was telling this the other day to somebody. I'm like, if Chief Downey was still around, he'd be so proud of what FEMA has become, particularly, of course, the New York Search and Rescue Task Force, because, my goodness, to comprise the best of ESU and comprise the best of the FDNY, all of whom have the same training. The only difference, as I've noted before, is that you guys in ESU carry guns, they don't, but you all know how to rescue people, to where if an ESU cop looks at an FDNY firefighter and says, can you get me this tool? He's not going to look at him like he has two heads. He's going to know exactly what he's talking about, and vice versa. Right. So to combine the two into something that has been in New Orleans for Hurricane Katrina, certainly in our backyard here for Superstorm Sandy, that was a brilliant invention by Chief Downey, and he cannot get enough credit for that.
No. His son now is a chief as well.
Yeah, both of them.
Both two. Okay, so I didn't know about the second son. But yeah, they carry on his legacy for sure. No doubt.
So I wanted to share this back to your time in HNT. And this job you talked about before, Bill Cannon, but for my listeners who may not have heard it, what's happening here?
Okay. So let's call him Larry, not his real name.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting story about Larry. So Larry, there's a backstory about Larry and how he wound up on this story. This is the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum on 42nd Street on 7th Avenue. So what happened with Larry? He gravitated to New York City. His when he was a young child, because I had asked him up on the ledge there, and I'm fast forwarding, and then I'm gonna have to go back again. But I had asked him. He was 19 years old at the time, and I said, Larry, you're 19 years old. I said, where are your parents right now? And Larry said to me, I don't know if they're dead or alive. I haven't seen them in over 10 years. He says his father abandoned the family when he was very young. His mother was the sole caretaker then, and she had turned to heroin. She was a heroin addict. And she had to, in order to support her habit and to feed her son, she would do tricks, prostitution tricks, in order to raise some money. So finally, he gravitates to New York City. He gets off the bus, and finally he realizes he's got nowhere to go. So he gravitates to Covenant House. Covenant House is a homeless shelter for 21-year-olds and under. And he goes there, and they take him in. No questions asked. They'll take you in. But finally, I hope those aren't gunshots you're hearing in the background, but no, they're fireworks. If you can hear them. Sorry about that.
No worries.
No, so anyway, he goes to Covenant House. But the Covenant House will take you in, no questions asked, but there are some rules that you have to abide by. The rules are you have to participate in house cleaning chores, you have to go to educational classes. And Larry was not doing any of that. He just stayed on his bunk bed all day and played video games. So finally, the Monsignor, it's a Catholic-run facility, after several warnings, invited him now to leave. Sorry, Larry, after several warnings, you're not abiding by the rules, you have to leave. So he gathers up his few belongings in a backpack. He starts walking along streets of New York City. Again, realizes he's got no money, he's got nowhere to go, no food. That's when he decides to just end his life. He's able to bypass security at the Madame Tussauds wax museum, gets to the rooftop, and that's where that picture is taken. So as I'm speaking with him, he's telling me that he's got no purpose in life. I had asked him, I said, Larry, can you please tell me what is so bad in your life that deserves a death sentence? And that's when he told me, I have no purpose in life. So at just about that time, he just told me that one of my negotiators was up on the rooftop with me, Detective Chris Breslin, is going through his backpack. And he comes up with a notebook, a spiral kind of notebook like that. And you'll see me holding that in my hand. And it was his innermost writings, his innermost feelings. And one passage, Chris Breslin says to me, hey, Lieutenant, just read this one paragraph. And the paragraph says something, and I'm paraphrasing. We must serve as a beacon of light to the underprivileged children of the world in order to show them the right path. So I asked him about it. I said, Larry, did you just write this? And I read it. He goes, where'd you get that? I said, well, we got it in your backpack. We're trying to identify who you are. Did you write that? And he says, yes, I wrote that. Well, Larry, you just told me that you have no purpose in life, and this tells me very differently. And I can help you with that. I can put you in touch with resources right now that can make you an intern in helping underprivileged children. There are many different agencies across the city that do that type of work. And maybe in time you become, get a paid position on that, as a counselor. But I can help you with that right now. So I'm giving you the short version, but finally how it ended, I said to Larry, I said, listen, Larry, when you are ready to come down off that ledge onto the rooftop, I'm going to give you my business card. This was my business information, my office phone number, my office email, nothing personal. And I says, when you get out, we're going to take you to Bellevue Hospital. You're very sane in your mind. I don't suspect you're going to be there more than a day or two. And then when you come out, you're going to call me. And I'm going to help you. So based on that, there's another photo in that series of him coming off that ledge. And then,
I'll show it now.
Oh, there you go. You have it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we escorted him to the hospital, to Bellevue. There you go. Now you see, this had to be something that Larry had to agree to on his own. With that metal girder there, the barrier, there was no way that myself, that's me in the foreground, trying to grab him, like I can hardly reach him, I can't reach him in fact. And emergency service could not have gotten to him in the background before he would have jumped because of that girder. So it had to be something that he wanted to do to believe in. I think the very best negotiators, and I'm not including myself in this category, but the very best negotiators are those that can get people to do what you need them to do by allowing them to believe that it's their idea. Getting them to do what you need them to do while allowing them to believe that it's their idea. So fast forward, about 2 days later, after he's out of the hospital, he just gets out I'm in my office. He calls me. Yeah, it's Larry. You told me to call you. Yeah, Larry. Thank you for calling me. What happened? He said they gave him some medication. They told him to come back in 3 weeks. I said, okay, that's a good thing. I said, Larry, how can I try to help you? So he says to me, I have nowhere to go. I said, okay. I said, I know the Monsignor in Covenant House. I can call him. I can ask him if he'll take you back, but I know what he's going to say. You're going to have to follow the rules. Are you willing to do that? He said, yeah, I'll follow the rules. Okay, then. I'll call you right back. So I called the Monsignor. He knew what was going on exactly. Those pictures that you've been showing, Michael, were in the newspapers. So he saw what was going on. And I asked him, I said, Monsignor, look, he's got nowhere to go. Can you take him back? And I said, before you even say it, I already asked him. He did promise that he would follow the rules. He said, okay, Jack, if he's going to follow the rules, tell him I'm waiting for him. So I called him back and I told him that he's waiting for him. So I never really followed up on these assignments too much. You might be surprised to believe, when I was doing this, we were averaging about 45 assignments per month, hostage type assignments, jumpers, barricade situations, actual hostage situations, where, I teach around the country hostage negotiations. I still do so today. And the average team across the country, maybe, if they handle 10 assignments per year, that's a lot. We were doing 45 per month.
Right.
So I didn't have a chance to really follow up on these assignments. There's just too many. But this one, I took a particular personal interest in it. So the following day, I called up the Monsignor. I was just curious as to whether he showed up or not. And he says, oh, yeah, Jack, he showed up. And right now he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's in the bathroom, cleaning the bathrooms. He says, I'll call you if anything changes. So I didn't hear back. So hopefully Larry went on to figure out his life, and maybe, who knows, help those underprivileged children out there.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But at least in that moment, you were able to stop him from making a permanent decision to a temporary problem, as the saying often says, And that's no, and I thought about that because I'm sure you saw the sad headline of the former Miss USA that tragically jumped to her death in Manhattan. Her name was Chesley Christ.
Michael, when we look at other people and we think they have a perfect life, but we don't know really what goes on behind those closed doors. Yeah. And every class that I do, the first morning after we do our introductions, I ask a question. And the question is, who in the class has never had a problem before in their life? Please raise your hand. And of course, nobody can raise their hands. And that question sets the tone for the rest of the week of training. Because now because you too have experienced adversity in your life, problems in your life, we all have. You can now understand and have a little more compassion, empathy, when now interacting with somebody who is behind that door, or on a rooftop, or on a door of a bridge, because you too have been there. So it's okay to have compassion and police, and the word police in the same sentence. It's in fact, it's critical.
Of course.
In the work that you do as negotiators. And for that matter, even for the patrol officer. Remember what I said earlier? It's not personal. Don't take it as such.
Yeah. And you look at somebody like her, a lawyer, a beauty queen. You look at somebody like Kate Spade. Kate Spade, a fashion icon. Anthony Bourdain, iconic chef. I love the band Soundgarden. Chris Cornell, one of the most distinctive voices in music history. And you think, oh, wow, them? How could they be unhappy? But the reality is, we don't know what goes on up here.
Just ask Dr. Rochelle, who's watching tonight.
Mm-hmm.
He's got stories for you, that he can't divulge, but he can tell you some real stories. Let me tell you.
Yeah, of course. I want to hit on a few more things, and this has been a great conversation, and I'm so glad that we could finally cross paths because we've been working on this for a long time. But you talked about teaching, not just around the country, but also around the world. You've been to Guantanamo Bay, as an example, and taught there. These experiences, sometimes in lands that are as well off as here, but sometimes not, are an eye-opener because you see what the cop is working with, what the negotiator is working with. And the negotiator, and I don't mean this in a bad sense, is a product of their environment, and they work within what they have. You working primarily all those years in Brooklyn, as an example, product of Brooklyn. And so the makeup of that borough and the makeup of the people in that borough. Same thing for the negotiator in the Philippines and the negotiator in France, whatever the country may be. So for these travels, the jobs are the same, but the environment is different. What's been the most notable experience for you?
While we're traveling, again, it's seeing how, maybe different approaches. I teach my class to learn my class.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that, every time I teach a class, some negotiator comes up with some gem. We did this one time and it seemed to be very effective. Oh my God, brilliant! I never thought of it. So now I kind of take that. I won't say steal it because I pass it on, to other classes for their information, their knowledge. But I think each class I do, whether it be across the country, and you're right, I have taught around the world, um, in different countries, and you always bring out something unique from those experiences. So I think, not to give anything specific because I would have to think about it. I don't want to take up the time on the show, but it's just about it's all personality based. You have to be. I think police negotiators have to be able to take themselves out of that role of law enforcement temporarily. Always never forgetting that you're police officers first, but maybe temporarily, and you have to have a certain spirit to be a negotiator. You know, Mike Trace, Chris Kendall, Scotty Wagner, those that you already mentioned earlier, who all had that certain spirit. And when I was selecting negotiators, I would look for that certain spirit. Believe it or not, I once had a detective come in, and I would always ask the same question: why do you want to be a negotiator? And this one guy said, "Yeah, Lieutenant, I'm retiring in 6 months. I'd like to have that on my resume." Well, thank you very much for your honesty, but he didn't get that assignment because it
Right.
was the wrong motivation. A lot of the negotiators came in, they had life stories, and I think the very best negotiators are those with the life stories who can stand as a living testament that people can come back when they're troubled. Look at me. So it makes that person on the other side of that door maybe feel not so all alone. Well, he's been through it and gotten through it. Maybe I can do the same. Yeah, you can. So you stand there as that living testament that people.
Also, if they're parents, if you can negotiate successfully with a toddler, that automatically should be a requirement to join HNT.
There you go. There you go.
You could talk a 2-year-old out of a temper tantrum. Well, then there you go. No further requirement needed. You're in H&T. Congratulations.
So much to me that about being a sergeant. In order to be a sergeant, you must have a prerequisite of being a parent first. So, and I knew what they meant by that. Yeah.
No, of course, and of course. So that brings us to the concluding segment. The hour's flown by. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah, my
It's,
gosh.
it's called Rapid Fire. 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 answers from you. Are you ready?
I think. Okay, let's try it.
And you could say pass if you want first. If not, for the NYPD, what other career could you have seen yourself pursuing and enjoying?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I was going to be a bus driver before I got that letter from the NYPD. So I guess I might have been a bus driver and then maybe look to pursue other endeavors, maybe the police department as well. But so I just go with the quick answer. Bus
Yeah,
driver.
that's fine. Second, and if it's not G-rated, that's why I say you could say pass, because sometimes they're not. They're funny, but they're not able to say on this show. Funniest call you ever responded to?
Oh, there is one, but I might not be able to say it on television. So let me pass on that one.
All right, that's fine.
Pass on that
So
one, yeah.
third,
I'll tell you it offline. Okay.
no, that's fine. Third, most uplifting call you ever responded to?
Anytime, Michael, we would have a rescue, say on a bridge, and we got somebody down, got them out of that immediate danger, and got them off to the help that, or the folks that can better help them, the Dr. Rochelles of the world. It was always an uplifting experience. I'd be behind that for a week. We saved a life. Now, it's oftentimes policing is a thankless job. You don't get a whole lot of thank yous out of the work you do. But that's okay because that's not why you're in it. You're not in it for the glory of it, but rather you have certain idealistic views of how you hope it turns out. And when it does, it's just uplifting. So, yeah.
Of course. And you should take pride in it because, of course, that person was able to see another day, and that's the goal. Everybody goes home. Everybody goes home safe and sound. Fourth, after a long day of talking to people out of precarious positions, what is Gentleman Jack's favorite bar or restaurant in New York City?
Oh my gosh! So I haven't been to a bar in a little while. Once in a while we meet some friends. There was a great place I used to go to. It's no longer there. It was called the Cercle Rouge, Circle of Red in French. It was in Chelsea on West Broadway, and I used to go there, pretty often. So, yeah.
Fifth and finally, let's say the Academy class at Madison Square Garden has just graduated, and the cops are filing out the newbies. If you can pull one of them to the side and give some advice to them, given your experiences, what would you tell them?
Well, I think don't be discouraged. They will come across a certain amount of folks within the job. They might have a negative or cynical view of the job. Don't get bogged down with that, but rather be self-motivated, do your job, be noticed without being noticed in a negative way by doing your job. Know your job, do your job. And I guess the best piece of advice I can give you is that, and I mentioned this a couple of times already, is it's not personal. Don't take it as such. It's people are lashing out at your authority, at your uniform, but not you, the person. And use some active listening strategies about trying to dissolve crisis. So, madam, you seem upset and get control.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Know your job, do your job is a Mark DeMarco line, by the way, that I've heard from him. I believe it's credited to him. So, Mark DeMarco, come on this show.
Hello, Mark. Come on the show, Mark.
That's another one. That's another one truck guide. Yeah, Mark was in truck one more senior guy.
Was one of my teachers as well. So,
oh, really?
He showed me a lot of different paths in the issue. Brilliant guy. He had more time than me on the job. And he was a teacher. He cared. So hello to you, Mark.
Hello to Mark. Hopefully I can have him on someday. So Jack, like I said, stick around. Don't say goodbye just yet. We'll say our goodbyes off the air. This has been great. This has been Volume 1, new miniseries, Talk to Me, Life on the NYPD's Hostage Negotiation Team. Any shout-outs that you want to give to anyone or anything in particular before we go?
No, just I wish the new police commissioner all the best in the world. Actually, Commissioner Schul is a former Nassau County hostage negotiator. And
oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. She headed up the team for a long time. And she came to I would conduct training twice a year for our negotiators in NYPD. Mm-hmm. And she would always come. I just saw her just a few weeks ago, just happened to run into her at a memorial service for Winston Liu and Rafael Ramos in Brooklyn here. She was there. So I went over, said a quick hello to her and wished her well. She believes in the process of, again, it's emotional intelligence is why she was hired. And I think they got the right person in her. So I wish her all the best in the world. And that big shout out to her as well.
All right. My shout out, as always, to you, the audience. Thanks for tuning in. I'll shout them out in order here. Alicia B., thanks for the questions. Alicia, you asked some great questions. My sister, Jaylene Michelle, Michael Pray. Mike, when you can, DM me on LinkedIn your resume of where you worked throughout your career so I can get you on the show too, and I can make an outline for you, buddy. Thanks, as always, for your support of the show. He's a big supporter. Kadamarie Morale Wade, great question by you earlier. Thank you for tuning in. David Burns, Stephen Wachschel, and Tilly Guidell. Her father was Gary Guidell from Rescue 1 of the FDNY. Another great guy who lost his life on 9/11. Tilly, thank you for being here. I appreciate you tuning in. So coming up on the Mike Deneen podcast, Jack, you'll know this next guest well. Former chief of detectives, Joe Borelli, will be here tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Yeah, Joe Borelli. Yep, 1989 to 1994. He was the chief of detectives and, of course, was on the task force that apprehended the Son of Sam killer in the 1970s. And I'm a big Knicks fan, so I'm looking forward to this interview. Chris Childs, the former point guard for the Knicks, who helped the team get to the finals in 1999. He'll be here this Friday. So all that coming up on the Mike Deneen podcast. In the meantime, on behalf of Gentleman Jack, retired NYPD Lieutenant Jack Cambria, I am Mike Colón, and this has been Volume 1 of Talk to Me, Life on the NYPD's Hostage Negotiation Team. We will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your night.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.